Okay, hello, good evening. Let me start our event that she'll bit. She has a JLPT and two, and she's doing business using Japanese. So she's a professional to speak Japanese. Yeah, and she's a professional of the business between Japanese. We are working together. And yeah, firstly, let me introduce myself and also our service. So this is Ani Terada, CEO and founder of Anu. That is a company focusing on the business between Israel and Japan to create innovation with these two great countries. And yeah, I graduated from Kyoto University and worked in Tokyo. And in 2014, I bought one-way ticket from Tokyo and came to Tel Aviv and started our business. And yeah, we are working with these uh, Japanese leading corporations to create new values. So, for example, like automotive corporations or chemical corporations, as you know, Israeli startups have yeah, very unique technologies and the way of thinking. You are thinking out of the box, right? And yeah, that's why like we prefer Israeli startups and technologies. And today we started our new business. It's called Axelnode. That is focusing on connecting cutting edge people with companies want to create innovation. That is called Axelnode. And let me show you like the intro of our service. So generally speaking, our platform is helping companies to find the best talent through exclusive networks. And also, yeah, we help candidates to find a good opportunity to yeah work. And as you see, yeah, our app is a mobile app or web app. So yeah, you can register through the link we will share later. And then like yeah, you can invite your friends to share like good opportunity, or like you can find like a good opportunity through your friends or from us. Actually, we are focusing on Japan to Israel and bringing some open positions from Japan in Japan. So yeah, you will be able to see some opportunities on this platform if you register or you got invitation. And for example, the company called Cyber Agent, that is one of the biggest IT companies in Japan, and yeah, they are doing like some business in their internet field. One of that is their TV station focusing on the internet or mobile app, and also they provide a gaming service, and they are looking for yeah talented engineers in the back end field mainly. So if you have a skill and also if you have a, if you can get the N1, then like you will be a good candidate for them. And actually, like most Japanese companies need like Japanese speakers. Even like if you have a good skills in the tech field, you must have the like N1 or N2 at least to communicate with Japanese engineers. So that is one of the mandatory skill or requirements. So that's why like maybe today's lecture will be useful for you. And yeah, we have a more open position. So if you are interested in that, yeah, please register from the URL we will share. And if you have any questions about our platform or anything about Japan, yeah, feel free to yeah text me. There's a chat, so yeah, you can feel free to write your question. Any questions so far? No? Okay, so she will give you a lecture, so please.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming today to my lecture about the JLPT. Give me 1 second to share my screen and we'll get right to it. Okay, can you guys see my screen now?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so let's get started. First, let's look at the outline for today's talk. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about the JLPT. I'm going to talk about a little bit about me, about why you should listen to me when you're trying to think about taking the JLPT. I'll talk a little bit about what the JLPT, what the test is by itself, what are the different parts, what are the different levels of the JLPT. I will give some advice about how you should decide what level you should take for the JLPT. Also, I will share the test composition. I will show you the different parts of the test, what are the different questions that appear in the different parts of the test according to the level that you're taking, and maybe some advice about how you should approach each of these questions. Then I will show you what grade you need to actually pass the test, what grade you'll need to pass the test, and how to calculate what the grade you need in order to see if you got to pass or fail. And then I will give you a little bit about how you should study and where you should study from, because the materials you're using is very important if you want to pass the test successfully. And then in the end, I will give you guys a little bit, some tips and advice about how I think that it's best to take the test and how you should study for it. So a little bit about me. My name is Shir David. I graduated from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem in 2014. I studied East Asian Studies and International Relations. And I went to Japan for 1 year where I studied in an intensive course, an intensive Japanese course in Doshisha University. And that's when I passed actually the N2 JLPT exam. And then later on, I worked in a startup and I worked in Intel for a while before going back to Japan to study my MBA in Kyoto University, where I got my MBA. And I came back to Israel in 2020 and started working for Anywu, where I am now a VP Business Development. So let's get started about the test itself, about the JLPT. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background about what the JLPT is itself. I'm pretty sure that most of the people that came to this talk already know this, but in case somebody doesn't know, I would like to share you with this knowledge. The Japanese language proficiency test is an exam to measure the Japanese language ability of non-native speakers, okay? It's meant to test the people that are not native speakers of Japanese to see how well they can understand the language. It is the most widely taken Japanese test in the world, and around 1 million people register to the test every year. It's like a standardized test. So you don't actually write in answers in writing. You only have to circle, you only have to mark the answers, the correct answers. So it's a standardized test. So anybody wants to study or work or move to Japan should definitely consider taking the JLPT, because in a lot of workplaces, like Anisan mentioned earlier, in many places of employment, they will ask to see if you have passed the JLPT in some level. Usually they will ask for the N2 or the N1 levels, which soon you will see are actually the highest levels of the test. And a lot of establishments, universities, and other kinds of study establishments ask to see your JLPT certificate as well. So it is an important test to take if you're planning to move to Japan, work in Japan, or study in Japan. I think it's also useful if you want to stay in Israel or in your home country, if you want to be in an interpreter or a translator or a person that works with the Japanese market. It is definitely also good to have the JLPT at hand when you're trying to get a job in the field in Israel. So taking the JLPT is actually quite important if you're looking to do any of these things. In Israel, the test is conducted by the IAJS. This is the Israeli Association for Japanese Studies. And it takes place once a year. In Japan, the test takes place twice a year, in July and in December. But in Israel, the test only takes place once a year in the first week of December, along with all the other countries in the world that take the test at the same day. And usually, I just found out, I did some reconnaissance for you guys, and apparently the test will take place this year in December as planned. but they haven't opened the registration yet, and it's not currently clear exactly how you can register for the test this year because of the whole coronavirus situation. It is not exactly sure how to do it currently. So I suggest stay tuned on the IAJS's website and the IAJS's SNS, their social media, like their Facebook page. Google it up, search it up, and stay tuned on their website to see how you can register for the test in Israel. All right, now I would like to explain about the different levels of the JLPT. Okay, the JLPT comes in 5 levels, with the N5, the N5 being the lowest level, and the N1 being the highest level, with a few levels in between. So the N5 basically only asks you to know a little bit of basic Japanese, while the N4 asks you to know most of the basic points of the Japanese language. Then there is the N3, which requires you to be able to conduct yourself in, everyday situations. So there will be kanji that appear in everyday situations, and there will be listening comprehension questions that ask you to be able to perform well in these kind of situations. The N2 requires you not only to be able to conduct yourself in everyday Japanese, but also in more advanced situation in a variety of circumstances in everyday life. And the N1 requires you to be practically almost a native speaker, if not more than that. Like sometimes even native speakers of Japanese see questions from the N1 and they don't really understand the question and can't really answer it because it asks very advanced Japanese, especially when it comes to the texts. The texts that appear in the test of the N1 are very, very long, and the reading comprehension is quite difficult. So it can be compared to, reading an article in a Japanese financial newspaper. So it does require quite a high level of Japanese. If you're an undergraduate university student in Israel, usually that means you can pass the test by your first year. You can most definitely pass the N5, and by the time you graduate, you will probably be able to pass either the N4 or the N3 level of the test. You guys do need to realize that there is a big jump between the N3 and the N2. So even if you finish the N3 and you're thinking, oh, I want to take the N2 next year, it's quite a big step. There is a big jump in the quality of Japanese that you need to know between N3 and N2. Now, when it comes to hours of study, according to the guidelines, to take the N5, you should have studied Japanese for around 325 to 600 hours. And you can see in this table the different amount of hours that are required for the different levels. And you can see for the N1, it requires between 3,000 to 4,800 hours of studying Japanese. It is a very, very long time to study. So maybe you can look at this and say, oh, I studied this and this much, then I can probably take this and this level. If any of you, I don't know if any of you are from China, or any of you speak Chinese or Korean or these kind of languages, these languages are actually more similar to Japanese than European languages. So if you come from that kind of background, then you don't need to study as much, and it will be more easy for you to take the test, especially when it comes to the kanji and the reading comprehension. Okay, so you just heard me talk about the different levels, but how do you decide which levels you should take? I mean, it's kind of hard to count all the hours that you studied, and sometimes even if you studied 3,000 hours, maybe you didn't reach the N1 level yet. So what level should you take? How do you decide which level you should take? I suggest going to the official website of the JLPT. I have the link here. I will send everybody who registered to the event will receive the slides in the end, so don't worry, you will have the link. And you can go into this website and find the questions there and try the sample questions. If you can answer most of the sample questions correctly, this probably means that you can take the corresponding level of the test. Okay, so you can try, let's say, trying the sample questions of, I don't know, N3, but you see that you can't answer most of them. Try again, try the N4, you will see that you can answer most of them, and then you should take the N4. You can also do some mock tests. You can get them available online, again, on the official JLPT website. You can look at the mock tests and see if you can pass or you can't pass, or how many questions you did get correctly, which things you need to focus on, etc. And that way you can decide which level you should take. And again, if you're an undergraduate in a university in Israel, then you should probably, after completing your studies, you should probably take either the N4 or the N3. Another advice that I do have for you guys is, if you're debating on which level to take the lower one, okay? And why am I saying this, okay? Again, like we say in Hebrew, yesh safek en safek, right? But still, why I'm saying that you should take the lower level is because, first of all, you shouldn't be studying Japanese just to take a test, okay, guys? You need to have the goal to be to master the Japanese language, okay? Just taking a test, my friend actually compared taking the JLPT to participating in the Olympics, okay? So people that, athletes that compete in the Olympics, actually they practice for many, many years until they reach some peak level, right? And only after they reach this peak level can they compete in the Olympics. So you should treat the JLPT in the same way. You should only take it if you're feeling that you're in your peak position. This goes for of course, the higher levels. If you're taking the lower levels like N5 or N4, you can probably be satisfied with the amount that you have studied until now. But if you're taking the really high levels, really remember that you need to be in peak shape towards this exam. And if you don't have time to study, then it's better to take a lower level than to, be sad that you couldn't pass, okay? It's just a test. Your goal is to master the Japanese language and not to, just pass test. A lot of people that take the test and pass the N1 or N2, and they can't even speak a single word in Japanese. And if a Japanese person comes and speaks to them, they cannot handle the conversation, okay? So don't treat this test like it's the ultimate test to see if you can or cannot speak Japanese. That is not the point of this test, okay? So you should probably take the lower level just to feel good with yourself, to say, oh, look, I passed the exam. I'm really good in Japanese. I did this, and you get the certificate instead of trying a higher level while not being in your peak condition and all of this. If you didn't have time to study, then just take the lower level that is a bit lower. Now about the test composition, I want to show you a little bit about how the test is built, okay? The different levels are built differently. Especially there is a big difference between the N5 to N3 to the N2 and N1, okay? All the tests, all the levels have three parts, which is the language knowledge, vocabulary, language knowledge, grammar, and the listening part. Okay, I will show you guys what kind of questions appear in each part later on. This is just to show you guys what are the different levels, what are the different parts that exist in every test. The biggest difference between N5 to N3, between N5 to N3 2 when compared to the N2 and N1, is that in these three tests, you have two breaks. You have a short break between the vocabulary part to the grammar part, and then to the listening part. While in the N2 and N1, you only get one break. Now, the length of the break really depends on where you're taking the exam. In some places, it can be 10 minutes. In some countries, it can be 30 minutes. It really depends on the location where you're taking the test. But you need to take into consideration that for the N2 and N1, you only get one break, while in the other tests, you get two breaks, okay? But basically speaking, the parts are kind of the same. They have the language knowledge, vocabulary, and grammar, and the listening. Here, it's divided to three parts, while on the higher levels, it's just two parts. This is how the answer sheet looks like. This in Hebrew, we call this Mifchan Amerikai, like an American test. I don't know why it's called that way, but that's how it's called. You don't have to write in any answers freely. You only need to mark the answers in the sheet, okay? Kind of like filling in a lottery, only you're supposed to know the answers. Okay, guys, try to know the answers. So let's say you look at the question number 1 and you think the correct answer is number 3. You mark in the answer with a pencil right here. You can only use a pencil, so please bring a pencil with you. Don't be sad if they don't let you take the test with a pen. So take a pencil with you, very important. Okay, let's look at some sample questions. This is from the vocabulary part. The questions I put in the slides are mostly from the N5 to N4 levels. These are actually tests that were conducted in the past. This is a sample test. So the first question is kanji reading. Very simple. Look at the kanji. Can you read it? Great. You can't read it? Too bad. So please make sure, try to be able to read the kanji that are in the tests. If you don't know the correct reading of the kanji, just guess. So for instance, here we have the question, watashi no senmon wa nani nani desu. And here you have all the answers. Of course, the correct answer is, Anisan, which one is the correct answer for this question?
Yeah, can you answer like the audience? Yeah, the answer is number 2, Igak. Yes, guy,
Yes.
you're correct.
Good job, guy.
Good job.
Yeah, the correct answer is Idak. Okay, this is the reading for this kanji. Let's move on to the next question. This one is orthography. This one is for if you can fill in the correct kanji for the hiragana that is written here. Okay, so here for this question, guys, would you like to read it? Mainichi radio de ongaku o kite imasu. Okay, which one of these kanji is the correct kanji for this hiragana? Which one is it? Guys, you want to try and answer? You're welcome to answer in the chat. And then now Ani-san, our native Japanese speaker, will give us the answer. And
So,
it is?
And the answer is number 1. So you
That's
guys
right,
are
number
correct.
1.
Cool.
Great, guys. So you see here, you have the line inside this one. So this is the correct kanji, okay, guys? Don't get confused. In the higher levels, it's even harder because they put in very similar kanji and you have to circle the right one. So make sure that you remember the different kanji and remember the different parts of each kanji that's going to appear in the test, okay? Don't get confused. Okay, the next one is word formation. This only appears in the N2 level of the test, okay? This is only in the N2 level of the test. But here what you have to do is you actually have to complete a word. There are a lot of words in Japanese that are actually 2 words put together. And you have to find the correct word that goes with the other part of the word in here correctly. Okay, according to, of course, the context of the sentence. Okay, so here this question, 新しい商品を売るために、彼は毎日忙しく、飛び and what is the correct part here? Does anybody know? I'll give you guys a few seconds to think about it. Ani-san, what is the correct answer?
Yeah, this is quite difficult, I think, like kind of the idiom. So, 彼は毎日忙しく飛び回っている. Number 3 is the correct answer.
飛び回っている. This means going around hastily, doing many things and being hasty. Okay? Mawa means going around, and tobi means like to jump or to fly. So this kind of idiom means going around hastily. Okay? So this is another type of question that appears only if you're taking the N2 level. It's quite a difficult question because it's from the N2 level. Another one that we have is expressions, okay? This means that in everyday conversation in Japanese, sometimes you will use some sorts of set expressions. So this kind of questions tests if you know the correct expression for the sentence, okay? So for instance, here we have something nani nani, shinai de dozo takusan tabete kudasai. Okay, so here you need to think about in this everyday expression, in this everyday sentence, what is the correct word that comes into this bracket. So does anybody know? Please try to write it in the chat. Ani-san, what is the correct answer?
Okay. The correct answer is 遠慮しないでどうぞたくさん食べてください.
This means feel free, don't hold yourself back. Please eat a lot. Eat as much as you want. Okay, guys? This is the answer to this question. Did anybody get it correctly in the chat?
Yes, Guy and Angelina. Good job.
Good job. Good job, guys. Okay, so another type of question that you have in the JLPT, this is all the levels, N1 to N5, paraphrases. This means you need to choose the other sentence from the options that mean the same thing, as the sentence in the top, okay? So for instance, here the sentence in the top says, 台所に料理が残っています. What is the other sentence from these answers that mean the same thing as the sentence in the top? Does anybody know? Try your best in the chat. Did we get any answers? Let's see. I'm not sure if okay. I don't think anybody knows the answer. Here we go. Kfir answered. That's right, Kfir. The correct. No, actually no. Daria, I think, answered correctly. Yes, it's the first answer. Okay. 料理は台所にまだあります。This means there is still food in the kitchen. These two sentences mean the same thing, right, Nisan?
Yes.
Great. Okay, very good job, Daria, for answering correctly. Okay, let's move on to the next type of question that we have. The next type of question is, why is it moving so slow? A usage. This you have from the N4 to N1. You don't have it in the N5. This means, can you use this word in a sentence? Can you or can't you? Okay, here we have the word jusho. I'm not going to tell you what the word means, only after you guys try to answer it yourselves. Try to read the sentences and tell me which one of these use the word jusho correctly. Okay, you guys want to give it a try? I'm going to give you a few a few seconds to try. Anybody wants to see if they can answer correctly? Guy answers 3 question mark. Yes, that's right, Guy. Anistan, would you like to read out the correct answer?
いや、ここにあなたのうちの住所を書いてください。
That's right. This means please write your address, your home address here. So, Guy, no need for question mark. You answered it correctly. Good job. Okay, the next type of question that we have, we moved on from the vocabulary part to the grammar part. Okay, and don't worry, guys, there is a list in the official JLPT website that shows you which questions appear in each kind of exam in like a very nice organized kind of table. So don't worry if I'm going through this a bit quickly. You will be able to see exactly which type of questions appear in your exam when you go in the JLPT official website. So don't worry about it, okay? Okay, let's look at this next type of question. This is selecting grammar form. This means you have to select the correct grammar form that goes into the brackets that appear in the question. Okay, guys, you need to be able to use the verb or the kind of grammar correctly inside the sentence. Okay, Ani-san, would you like to read out the question?
私の消しゴムを見ませんでしたか？あ、机の下に何々ですよ。
Okay, guys, try your best. I know you can do it. This is N4 level, so I know some of you guys can do it. I believe in you. Okay, let's see. Both Daria and Guy answered number 1.
Yeah.
Ani-san, what do you think?
Yeah, that's correct. 落ちていますよ。There is a eraser under your desk.
Yeah. So that is the correct answer, guys. Okay, good job, Guy, Kfir, and Angelina, and I think Daria as well. Good job, guys. Okay.
Good job.
So this is another type of question that appears in the test. Now, the next kind of question, I think, is actually the kind of the most complicated one in the grammar section. This one, you have to actually compose the entire sentence sort of by yourself when they only give you the parts, okay? And you have to, your answer that you mark is the word that is supposed to appear where the star appears here in the sentence, okay? So there are 4 brackets. In each one of them, one of these needs to go in. And the star is marked which of the answers, which of the parts of the sentence that is the answer. Okay, so let's look at this question. Ani-san, would you like to read it out?
山下さん、お礼の手紙はもう出しましたか？いいえ。です。
Okay, now let's try to think. Which one of these should go in here? Which one of these should go in here? Which one of these should go in here, and which one of these should go here. So let's try and think which one of these corresponds to the star. Let's see, we have an answer from Daria, which is number 4. Let me just create this sentence. Just a second.
Orei is thank you letter or something. Orei no tegami means like a thank you letter.
Yes, that's right. Okay, so Ani-san, would you like to tell us the correct answer?
いいえ、今書いているところです。So number 4 is the correct answer. Right.
That's right. So,
Yeah.
Who answered it correctly? Daria and Yaron. Good job, guys.
Yeah, and Emiliano is writing
great.
Japanese correctly. Good job.
Very good job, Emiliano. Yes, so that is the correct answer to this question. Yeah. Now let's move on. From here on out, there won't be any more questions, so you guys can relax. The next type of question that appears is text grammar. This means there's going to be a text, and inside the text there is going to be blank spaces, and you need to know which kind of grammar needs to go inside the blank spaces in the text. Okay, so that is the next kind of question that appears in the grammar part of the JLPT. Okay, guys. So that is the text grammar. Now we're going to move on to the reading. Because the questions for reading are usually very, very long, I didn't put them here in the PPT because we won't be able to answer them together anyway. It will take too long. So I'm just going to tell you guys about the different parts, okay? The different kind of questions that you have in the reading. So first you have 3 types of comprehension. This is basic reading comprehension. You read the text and you need to understand what the point of the text is, and you need to understand sometimes they also ask you what kind of words need to go in each part. Okay, then there are different lengths. You have all the short and the mid-sized passages. They come in both in the N1 all throughout to N5, but the longer passages, there is going to be some longer passages with a little bit more complicated things to understand. That goes in the N1 and the N3. Then you have something called integrated comprehension. This one is actually pretty interesting because they give you 2 different texts. It's one question, but you have 2 different texts, and you kind of have to compare, or you kind of have to compare the opinion of both the people that wrote the texts, etc., etc. And this only comes in the N1 and N2. Then you have thematic comprehension. This is a very long passages. These only come in N1 and N2. Actually, these ones are usually some sort of story, or a writer, or somebody wrote like some sort of article about some specific theme, and then you need to understand what they're trying to say. You need to understand what their opinion about it is, etc., etc. And the last type, this is something that exists in all the levels of the JLPT. It's called information retrieval. Information retrieval, in these, usually you get some sort of table, or you get some sort of ad, something that you might see hung up in your apartment building, or in the street, or in the newspaper. And you have to understand what's going on in the ad. They will ask you, let's say that it's an ad about some available apartments in some neighborhood. Then they will ask you, what kind of apartments are available? What are the numbers of apartments available? At what time can you go see the apartment, etc., etc. So you need to be able to look at these kind of ad or this table and extract information out of it. These are considered to be longer passages, and they have it from the N1 throughout to the N5. You can also see them. Do we have time? We don't have that much time. So if we have some time later, I can show you how it looks like in the actual test, because I have the link here, and I can show you how these kind of things look like in the test, okay? The next type of question that we have for the JLPT is the listening, okay? The listening is very important. In the listening, for some parts, you will have the answers written in the answer sheet, and in some cases, you won't have the answers listed in the answer sheets, and you have to listen to the answers themselves. So they will play this tape. They play a tape in the exam venue, and you need to answer the questions according to what you hear from the tape. And in some cases, you will have the answers written down, and in some cases, the answers you also have to hear them. Okay, guys? So these are the kind of questions that exist for the listening part. The first type of question is task-based comprehension. This is usually shorter passages, kind of like shorter passages with usually 2 people talking. They also read out the question before you actually hear the conversation. And then you hear them talking and you need to understand the next step. For instance, there is a boss who is telling their employee, go to the copy room and make 30 copies. You need to be able to understand that this is what the boss asked the employee to do. Okay, so this is task-based comprehension. The next type of thing you have is comprehension of key points. This is kind of similar to the task-based comprehension. The only thing is that it's quite longer, it's a little bit longer, and usually they will ask you to listen to just this one small detail. Okay, so you need to be able to listen very, very carefully when you listen to this question. The next one is comprehension of general outline. This is also a longer kind of a question, a longer kind of usually it's something from the radio or some news part or something. And in this case, you don't have the answers actually written down in your exam sheet. Okay, so you really need to be able to also listen and understand the answers. So it's kind of useful. It can be useful to actually write down some notes. And what I like to do is write because you can write notes inside your exam sheet, not inside the paper where you write the actual answers, you know, with the circles, but inside the paper, Excel, for you have the questions written down, you can actually, you know, write some notes for yourself. So I think it's really useful to write 1, 2, 3, 4, because usually you need to choose from 1 to 4. And then while you're listening, you can cross off the wrong answers and then choose the right answer in the end. So that is kind of a tip that I found is very useful for me when I'm doing the listening comprehension. Also, I could give this tip in the end, but anyway, also you guys need to make sure that you're listening very carefully to each question, because sometimes we're still busy thinking about the previous question. We're like, oh, what did Tanaka-san say? What did he say? I didn't understand. And then because you're so focused on the previous question, you're not listening to the question that you're listening to, that you should be listening to right now. So if you didn't get it, you didn't get it. Just write some answer. It's better than not writing anything, and just move on and be able to listen carefully to the next question. And then the next kind of question you have is verbal expressions. This usually goes for the lower levels of the JLPT. You'll have like some picture of 2 people or 3 people and an arrow that will point to one of them. And the answer, the correct answer, will be what that person is saying, what you think that person is saying in the conversation. Okay, so that is verbal expressions. And then another type of question you have is quick response. Quick response. This is like the name suggests. It's actually really quick, like yaritori, just people talking. And you need to understand what is the correct answer to the question being presented by one of the participants in the conversation. So let's say he tells you, please sit down. You need to understand what is the correct answer to say when somebody tells you, please sit down. Usually they will have really ridiculous answers written into these answers. So sometimes it'll be, please sit down. And then the other person is saying, I brought your gift, or, you know, something really, really ridiculous. And sometimes you will also hear the participants in the room laughing, like snickering, because the answer is so ridiculous. So use that as a hint. Use that as a hint and understand that if somebody is laughing from the answer, if many people are laughing from the answer, probably it's not the right answer. So you should be able to at least cross off a few of the wrong answers that way during the exam. And then the next one is integrated comprehension. This only goes for the higher levels of the test for N1 and N2. In this case, you will hear a long conversation. You need to stay focused throughout the conversation because it's very long. And you will be asked a few questions, not just one question about the conversation. So you need to make sure that you point out and you think about and you're able to notice many small details inside this conversation. Okay, so these are the type of questions in the listening part. Make sure you stay focused. If you get a question, if you didn't get something, just move on. Don't forget about it and keep focusing on the questions that are at hand. Okay, guys? All right, now we know about the level that we want to take. We know about the different kind of questions that appear in each part. Now we need to know how much do we need to get to pass the test. In the JLPT, actually, you get your score, but let's say you didn't pass the test. Let's say you didn't pass the required score to get a passing grade. In that case, you did not get the qualification of the JLPT. You must pass a certain score, okay? You must pass a certain score in order to get the passing grade. It's not like you can get a 60 and then you can show your future employees, look, I got a 60 out of 100 or whatever. No, it's only pass or non-pass. Of course, you also get the slip that shows you how many points you got in each part, but as a qualification, you have to finish, you have to answer a certain number of questions correctly and pass a certain score, okay? So here you can see this score when it comes to, let's look at, let's say the N1 to N3. So you see that you need to get an overall mark of 100 in the N1 out of 180 points. In the N2, an overall of 180 points, you only need to get 90 points. In the N3, you only need to get 95 out of 180. But, and it's a big but, you also need to get the scoring in each of the sections. You also have to pass a minimum score, okay, guys? So for instance, in the vocabulary grammar for the N1, there is 60 points to take overall. You need to get at least 19. The same for the reading and the same for the listening. Okay, guys? You don't only need to get the overall score, you also you need to get to pass a minimum score in each of the sections. Okay? So don't be too happy, even if you got an overall mark of 100, but you got, I don't know, a 0 in the reading. Is that possible? Yes. So you didn't pass the test, okay? So be very careful don't concentrate on studying just one part of the exam. You might think yourself, oh, if I only need 100, then I can just, focus a lot on vocabulary and grammar and just pass it. But no, you also need to get the passing score in each of the sections. This also goes for the N4 and the N5. It's a little bit easier because you need to get 90 out of 100 for the N4 and 80 out of 180 for the N5. And as you can see, the scores here are pretty low. Out of 120 points, you only need to get 38 for that. So, and for here, out of 60, only 19. Okay. So just remember that you need to get an overall passing score and for the different sections. Okay, that is the point I'm trying to make in these slides. Okay, now what do you study and how do you study for the JLPT? The different parts of the JLPT, we already discussed them. There is a part with reading, there is a part with vocabulary, listening, kanji, and grammar. So you need to study all of these parts in order to pass the JLPT successfully according to your level. You don't need to practice speaking and you don't need to practice writing because you are not tested for that in the JLPT, luckily. They might change it in the future, pray that they don't, because that will make the test a lot harder. And a lot of people actually pass it without really knowing Japanese just because they study a lot of kanji. But anyway, it will make the test harder. So be grateful that you only need to study these 5 points: reading, vocabulary, listening, grammar, and kanji. Now, how to study these different points? I'm going to share with you some online resources in the beginning, some resources you can click into right now and start studying. One of them is Wanikani. I really recommend the Wanikani for studying kanji and vocabulary. It's a really good resource. They teach you the kanji from the very basics up, so up from the radicals up to the most advanced kanjis that you can think of. So I really recommend this website. The lower levels are actually for free, but the more you advance in the levels, then you might have to start paying at some point. But it really helps because it groups them into groups and you study each group every day. And then after a certain time, it tells you to review these groups again. So it doesn't only help you study it once, but actually help you retain the memory of the kanji that you're studying, because it helps you review it once in a while. It's a really good program. I really recommend it if you're serious about Japanese. The next one we have are 2 resources that actually you can study kanji, vocabulary, and grammar from. These are just resources that exist online to help you know what kind of grammar and what kind of kanji and what kind of vocabulary you need to study for each part of the exam. So one of them is Imabi. you can really search through the different levels of the JLPT, like beginner or beginner 2, intermediate, and there you will have different resources for studying Japanese. And the next one is the JLPT Sensei. Here it's actually divided into the different levels of the JLPT, and you can see really a comprehensive information. Now, do a note that you guys really do have to point out, you need to make sure that you understand this point, is that there is no real list that says these are the kanjis that might appear on the JLPT for the N5, for the N4. All these lists that you see online are actually kind of recommendations or are information that was extracted from previous tests. So they looked at all the previous tests because the test has been going on since 1984, and it got changed a little bit around the 2000s, but never mind. And then they saw that in N1, a lot of these kanjis appear, or in N5, a lot of these grammar points appeared. So according to that, they made the lists. But actually, it doesn't mean that if you study all the entire kanji list, that doesn't mean that another kanji will not appear in the test, okay? So take these lists and these study materials as like kind of a recommendation. And if some kanji that didn't appear in your list suddenly shows up in the test, don't get angry. It's not a bug, it's a feature, like they say in the programming. Okay, guys? So another two things, another source that I really recommend using when you're studying Japanese is Takoboto. Takoboto is a Japanese dictionary that but it's not unlike other dictionaries. Every word that you search, you can easily make it into an Anki card. You can easily make it into a memorization tool. Okay, so I really recommend Takoboto because it works not only as a dictionary, but also as a way to memorize kanji or vocabulary. The same goes for Anki. Anki actually, where this name comes from, Anki actually comes from something called Anki cards or memorization cards. So you get these cards with two sides, and on one side you have the kanji, and on the other side you have the meaning of the kanji and the reading of the kanji. Okay, so if you read this kanji and you say, oh, I think the correct reading is this, and then you look at the other side and, oh, actually I got it wrong, oh, actually I got it right. So you can actually make these cards. Of course, you can make physical cards like that if you want to, but you don't have to because you have the Anki app for the Android. I think for the iPhone it's not for free, but for the Android it's for free for sure. And you can write in the kanji and the meaning, and it will create these memorization cards for you automatically. Okay, so I really recommend these two apps. Of course, if you're really serious about studying for the JLPT, you will need some books. I hope you like books because you will need them. So the first kind of books I recommend getting are the official book trial examination questions. These are actually released by the Japan Foundation. It's the organization that creates the JLPT, and they have mock tests inside. Okay, mock tests. So you can see the different kinds of questions that come out, and you can also test yourself with time to see if you're making it in time to finish the test. And you can get it for all the levels of the JLPT. I really recommend getting them. They're pretty cheap. Later on, I will explain to you guys where you can get books in Japanese. Another series of books I really recommend is Try. I really like these books for studying Japanese because it starts with some text that you can read, and there is also listening. It also comes with a CD, and from inside the text, it will have some grammar points you should point out or some kanjis that you should remember. So it's actually a really good resource for studying Japanese, sort of like how you study it in a classroom. If any of you studied, I'm sure at least some of you went to university and studied Japanese. So that's kind of how this book works, and I really like it. But generally speaking, I really recommend any book that is made by this Ask Publishing. Any of their books are really, really good. So I really recommend using them. They also have this Somatome series. It's called Somatome. And this one has, instead of like the Try book where you have everything comprehensed into one book, they have a different book for each of the subjects that come up in the exam. For instance, you have one for Bunpo, for grammar, you have one for Chokai, for listening. So it comes in different booklets, and it's divided by different weeks and different days, so you can schedule your studying. So I really recommend the Somatome series as well. Other books by Ask, they have this question. It's just a question book. It's just a book full of questions that you can answer before taking the exam. And they also have this kind of book with the tango, with the words that you need to memorize before the test. So I really recommend any book basically by this publisher. I really think is really good. Another book that I recommend is the Kanzen Master. The same sort of like Somatome. It's divided into the different topics that appear in the exam. I myself have not used it, but some of my friends that did pass the exam successfully said it's really good. So I'm putting it here for you guys to see. And here are some links where you can get Japanese books. Okay, so you can get some of these books on Amazon. You can get some of them in a website called Book Depository. But basically, I really, really recommend using CD Japan. In CD Japan, you can basically get any book that is published in Japan, almost any book, you can get it in this website, and they do ship to Israel. Although right now the shipping is pretty expensive because of the coronavirus, and Japan only ships, I think, like through FedEx or something. So the shipping comes up quite expensive, but it has a big advantage over the other places because you can get any book you want there. Any book in Japanese that you want, you can get it from this website. But most of the ones for studying Japanese, like Kanzen Master, Somatome, you can also get them on Amazon. The Book Depository, actually, it's quite a limited inventory, but you can try there as well. Okay, so let's move on to the next part of my talk, which is test taking tips and advice. I'm going to give you guys some advice on how you should prepare or how you should do while you're doing the exam itself. So a first tip I always love to share when making these kind of talks is how to study kanji or vocabulary. So remember I told you about the Anki cards, about the memorization cards. They kind of look like this, but you don't need the physical ones. Just use the app. This is 2021 now. Who needs paper anyway? But actually you do need paper because the best way I think for studying kanji, I think the best way is through pain. You need to feel the pain of writing the kanji again and again and again and again until your arm hurts and until you get tired. Just write the same kanji 100 times. I'm telling you, you will remember it. Okay? So if you're really looking for the best way to study kanji and you have a lot of time, I really recommend just writing it many, many times until you get tired, until your arm wants to fall off. This is kind of 2 tips that I have for studying kanji and the vocabulary. You have the Anki cards and using this kind of paper. This is traditional paper, Japanese paper for writing kanji and for writing essays. So you can download it and print it, or you can buy it on Amazon. I really recommend using that. Another tip I have is time management. While you're taking the test, you will not have time. I mean, maybe if you're taking the N5 or the N4, but N3 and above, the time gets really, really tight, especially when you get to the reading part. So I really suggest, no matter what level of the test you're taking, make sure that you know how many questions appear in each part and time yourself accordingly. Please bring a watch with you, okay? You don't want to be one of those people taking the exam and having to look at the clock every 3 seconds, okay? Make sure to bring a clock with you. If you have a stopwatch from the psychometry, that's even better. Try your best to manage your time during the exam, and before the exam, decide how much time you want to spend on each question. Make sure that you're leaving enough time to do the reading part, because the reading part, it's the hardest part. It is the most time-consuming part. It's the one that requires the most concentration. So try to leave as much time for the reading part as possible when you're taking the test, and bring a watch with you. Next advice that I have, no time, lottery time. So in the JLPT, like I showed you guys, you have to just fill in some empty circles to decide your answer, right? So if you think the correct answer for question number 3 is answer 4, under 3, you fill in the circle that says 4, okay? However, at some point in the exam, you might run out of time and you're gonna be like, oh, what am I gonna do? You don't get a penalty for wrong answers. So if you're running out of time, if you see that there is only 2 minutes left, just fill in the exam blankly like a lottery ticket. Okay, it's better than not having any answers at all. You might get lucky and guess some of the correct answers. Okay, so I really recommend taking the lottery, the kind of lottery outreach when you're doing the test. Just to do it as if it's a lottery if you're running out of time. The next advice that I have, that just before the test, try to immerse yourself in the language as much as possible. So this is the Japanese flag. I want you guys to be smack in the middle of that flag, okay, guys? I want you to listen to news in Japanese. I want you to watch anime if you like anime, or drama in Japanese. Try to read as much Japanese as you can in your everyday life. Listen to the radio. Just try to immerse yourself in the language as much as possible, because we really kind of take in a lot of things subconsciously many times. Our brains are kind of like a sponge. So if you listen to Japanese enough time, then your brain will get accustomed to it, and it will be really helpful for you during the exam. And this is the last tip for you guys, okay? Remember, it's just a test, okay? Don't get too stressed out. Oh, I didn't pass. Oh, what am I gonna do? My Japanese sucks. No, it's just a test. Like I told you before, there are many people that pass the test and they cannot speak a word in Japanese. Your goal should be to master the Japanese language, not master test taking, okay? So even if you don't pass it, it's no big deal. The only time when it's a big deal is if you want to get into some university or some job. But remember that some jobs, yes, most jobs do require you to have the N1 or N2. But if you go into that interview and you show them that you speak fluent Japanese, trust me, if you only have the N3, they won't mind that you don't have the N2 or the N1, okay? So remember, it's just a test. Don't stress yourself out too much. The important thing is to master the Japanese language, not to master test taking. Okay, guys? Great. So that's all I had to say to you today. Many, many things. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We will send the slides and the links later on via mail for everybody that registered. And now is your time to ask me any questions. If you have any questions for me or for Anisan about Japan, about working in Japan, about the JLPT. I took the JLPT 3 times, so I passed each time somehow. So if you guys have any questions about the JLPT or anything else, I would love to answer. And please join our Facebook group. We really love this group. It's really great. We post about news from Japan, and we post like cool places to go in Tokyo and the rest of Japan, and some cool places some cool kind of like products that you can buy in Japan, etc. So I really recommend joining our Facebook group before you guys leave. And thank you very much for listening to my talk. Thank you, Yaron.
Thank you so much. That was interesting, even for me. ありがとうございました。
ありがとうございました。We still have 3 minutes, so if anybody wants to ask any questions, we would love to answer.
היי, אפשר לשאול?
Yes, please.
אפשר בעברית בשביל הנוחות? בסדר?
אפשר, בטח, אין בעיה, בכיף.
האנגלית שלך פשוט ממש טובה, וכשאני משווה את זה להבנה או דיבור שלי באנגלית, ההבנה מאוד טובה, וזה זרק אותי לבגרויות באנגלית. אם היינו צריכים לדרג את הבגרויות הישראליות באנגלית בהשוואה ל-JLPT, איך לצורך העניין JLPT 5 היה שווה לאנגלית 3 יחידות, או איך היית מדרגת?
הבנתי. I'll just translate your question for people that don't know Hebrew. So basically, he wants to know about the tests that you take in the high school. When you finish high school in Israel, you have to take a test called Bagruyot. It's kind of like SATs. So he wants, Emiliano-san wants to know how it compares to the JLPT, like level-wise. So I will answer in Hebrew, so everybody can understand. So basically, מה שלדעתי, הרמה של נגיד 3 יחידות באנגלית, היא אפילו יותר גבוהה מרמה של נגיד N5 ב-JLPT. די בטוח. כי הרמה של ה-JLPT N5 זאת באמת רמה של יפנית סופר בסיסית. כאילו, אני חושבת שיש שם רק איזה 100 קאנג'ים או משהו כזה, והרמה של הדיבור גם מאוד מדברים מאוד מאוד לאט וכולי וכולי, אז לדעתי מבחינת הבגרויות, לדעתי אפשר להגיד בביטחון רב שה-JLPT-N5 הוא יותר קל מנגיד בגרות באנגלית של 3 יחידות. אני לא יודעת לגבי 5 יחידות, 5 יחידות כבר מבקש רמה די גבוהה של אנגלית, ולדעתי אפשר להשוות את זה לנגיד JLPT, N3, לא נראה לי ש-N2 אבל N3, אוקיי? זה עונה על השאלה שלך, אמיליאנו?
כן, ואם אפשר שאלה נוספת, מבחינת אפליקציות או מקורות לימוד, מה דעתך על דואלינגו?
אני לא מתה על דואלינגו. ה-AI שם, בעיקר כשזה מגיע ליפנית, זה גם מלמד אותך הרבה דברים שהם לא כל כך רלוונטיים לחיי היום-יום ביפן. זה טוב בשביל משהו בסיסי, כן? אם אתה באמת רוצה ללמוד יפנית בסיסית, דואלינגו זה מאוד נחמד, אבל אם אתה באמת רוצה עכשיו להגיע לרמה טובה של יפנית שמתאימה ל-JLPT, זה מבחנים שהם סטנדרטיים, ועדיף ללמוד לפי חומרים שנועדו ללמידה בשביל ה-JLPT, לדעתי.
תודה.
בכיף, תודה לך. אוקיי, יש לנו כאן עוד שאלה מדריה. You're welcome. Is it true listening audio is aired once only? No, yes, it's correct. It doesn't depend on the level. It's only aired once, so you really need to concentrate. And if you were thinking about dinner instead of listening to the question, then there's no going back. So make sure that you're listening very carefully. And how difficult is N2 compared to N3? I only took the N5, N4, and then I jumped to the N2, so I didn't take the N3. But from what I heard, it is a lot harder. The N2 is a big jump. There is a big jump. There's not a big jump between N4 to from N5 to N4 and from N4 to N3, but from N3 to N4, actually the jump is pretty large. The amount of kanji you need to know are a lot larger, and the reading comprehension is much more difficult. So I think if you're trying to decide whether to take the N3 and definitely succeed, or take the N2 and maybe succeed, I will definitely recommend taking the N3. Thank you, Yael. Yes, thank you for confirming that it's 100 kanjis for N5. Is there an age limit for taking the test? Not that I'm aware of. I don't think that there is. I know a lot of young people that took it. It just usually people take it when they're in university, so usually it's above 18, but I know some people even in high school that took the JLPT, so I don't think there's a limit. I mean, if you're 5 years old and you want to register, probably you can't, but I think as long as you're in high school, it should be fine. But I'll have to get back to you on that. Can someone get a work visa in Japan if he has a decent level of Japanese, say N2 to N3? That really depends, because a work visa you get from the company that sponsors you. Okay, so if the company that sponsors you doesn't mind that you have a decent level of Japanese and you don't have N1, then sure, you can get a work visa. There's also something called the there is some special type of visa that you can get in Japan according to how proficient you are in Japanese, and according to your profession. And in that kind of visa, the calculation, actually, the higher the JLPT level you have, then the more points you can get towards getting a visa. So actually, for getting a visa, maybe getting the higher levels is better. But yes, you can get a work visa if you don't have N1, as long as the sponsoring company, the company that sponsors you, received you to take the job. Some people get work visa without knowing any Japanese. So that's that. Honestly, I'm planning to take it for now. Okay, that's not a question, just a statement. Okay, thank you, Daria. Great. So does anybody else have any other questions for me at this point? And even if you don't want to ask it here, if you want to ask me personally, you're more than welcome to drop me an email or add me on LinkedIn. I would love to help anybody who studies Japanese here in Israel or around the world. We'll be happy to help. So if there are no further questions, I think we would like to end the event here. In Japan, it's quite late now, and I assume some people want to go to bed now. So, or in Israel, want to go have dinner. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming today. And I hope to see you again in our next day event in Axelnode. And please join our Facebook group to hear about our next events and about cool things from Japan. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Have a great night.
Bye.
ありがとう。
תודה רבה.
תודה רבה, אריגתו גוזיימאס.